Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump gave Turkish strongman President Erdogan a green light to invade northern Syria over a week ago. And then, as reporting continued to bolster the case that his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has been working on behalf of Turkish interests, the president followed up that decision with an impossible to summarize set of wildly contradictory, often racist pronouncements about the situation in northeastern Syria. That as the U.S. was forced to evacuate its troops and bomb its own bases, while Kurdish civilians were fleeing, civilians were being killed, and the Turks and Syria's President Assad basically carved up that strip of earth. That was the reality when Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo arrived in Turkey to meet with Erdogan and emerged today with a deal, quote unquote, that gives Turkey everything they want. President Trump said Turkey has been trying to get this deal for years, and in a way he is right. For years, Erdogan has wanted to ethnically cleanse northeastern Syria of Kurds. That's what he wanted, and that was the ultimate point of this mission. The deal struck today is that for 5 days, Turkey will pause to allow the Kurds to leave the area, thereby ethnically cleansing themselves so that Turkey can go and get the rest of that territory. And in exchange, the U.S. agreed to remove economic sanctions imposed earlier this week, as well as the threat of further sanctions. Meaning, the sum total of this is that Turkey has gotten everything he wanted. The Kurdish allies, who lost 11,000 of their own people fighting side by side with American soldiers to defeat ISIS, have now been repaid with U.S.-approved removal from the land. Joining me now, Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Iraq War veteran, Purple Heart recipient, who's a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, the Vice President, the President Mike Pompeo, all saying this is a huge deal struck in Turkey today, but the facts appear to essentially allow the Turks a kind of campaign of ethnically cleansing the area of Kurds and U.S. withdrawal of sanctions. How do you see the deal?
How is this a huge deal to have essentially a 120-hour pause on a situation created by the White House? We are absolutely far worse off today than we were roughly 10 days ago when they started this whole process. So I'm not quite sure that they should be congratulated or they should be patting themselves on the back for getting a pause to a situation that they initiated themselves.
You obviously fought in Iraq, and I know that a lot of U.S. service members have been expressing their feelings about Kurdish folks that they had fought with or talked to, and obviously that Kurds in Iraq are different than those in Syria, although they occupy a large part of that part of the world. Do you have reflections or feelings as you watch this unfold based on that experience?
The Kurdish fighters have stood shoulder to shoulder with American troops in this fight against ISIS. They've lost 11,000 of their fighters in order to help us defeat ISIS. They did everything we asked them to do to go after and get rid of ISIS and to take the remnants of ISIS and put them into the prisoner camps that they were in. And what have we done? We've abandoned our allies. And all that Trump has done with this move is allow us to basically put our allies in a position where they're being slaughtered by the Turks. And now we're sending a message to the rest of the world. Don't work with the United States. You can't trust us to stand by you.
There are concerns I've seen from certain quarters about the president's temperament, behavior, and actions in the last few weeks, particularly. There are always concerns about that, but particularly the last few weeks. Do you have particularly acute concerns over the last few weeks? Do you feel like his conduct is appreciably different in a concerning way?
Well, he's managed to create much more damage than I ever thought that he would possibly be able to commit. This situation with the Kurds and with the president, what concerns me is less the president than the people around him. You know, he's got General Milley, he's got Secretary Esper, he's got military leaders around him who, they don't have a say in this. He moved forward with his decision without talking to them, and now they're not stepping up. You saw that picture that the president tweeted, and Speaker Pelosi made her cover photo. You know, those men are hanging their heads through the president's left and right because they know that he's wrong and that he has no strategy for defeating ISIS. He has no strategy for Syria. And it's taking Speaker Pelosi to confront him on it. And what are they doing? Nothing. That's my concern, is that the advisors around him and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are enabling this man to do the kind of damage that he's done to our national security.
There was a House vote yesterday with an overwhelming bipartisan majority to condemn the president's policy in this area. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, has called for Mitch McConnell to bring up the same piece of legislation or resolution in the Senate. Would you like to see that as well?
I would love to see that. I'd like to see that vote come down because I think the message would be clear to the White House that there's bipartisan opposition to this decision the president has made.
The president also, through his chief of staff today, announced that the United States government will be hosting a global summit at the president's own personal property, which is essentially awarding a contract to himself. It will force the federal government to spend money that will go into the president's pocket. It will force foreign governments to spend money to go in the president's foreign pocket. Do you think that's appropriate? Do you think that's lawful?
It's not at all appropriate, and it's not at all lawful. I'm actually part of the emoluments lawsuit that has its basis in this very same thing that's happening with foreign governments booking stays in the Trump Hotel here in Washington, D.C., and in various places to try to curry favor with this president. Time and again, this president has shown he's consistent on a couple of things. One, he's consistent when it comes to lining his own pockets and his family's pockets with whatever he needs to do in order to further Trump properties. And the other is that he sure loved his dictators. He has cozied up to North Korea and now to Erdogan in Turkey.
It is Friday, the 18th of October of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the diner of life, indeed. Well, you do know that the French 77s, the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails, is virtually poured and available and ready. I guess that's redundant, but it's for your imbibing pleasure here in this virtual world, so please do. And if you're imbibing in the real world, do it with a friend, because you'll need each other to hold each other up. If you have really two, if you have more than two, you'll be sitting for a while, pinned to the sofa, as we used to say back in the day. Well, speaking of back in the day, wow, looks like we got ourselves our own little Saigon right now in 1975, and we're bugging out. Yep, we're sending sorties over our military bases and blowing them up because we didn't have enough time to be able to withdraw properly because of the impetuous nature of one Donald J. Trump. Or is it Donald T. Trump? Regardless, this guy, by all accounts, he is absolutely losing it. Apparently in that point down with Nancy, he was raging. And GOP members, of course, nobody's going to go on the record. Oh, man. You know why Nancy stood up? Everybody is saying, she was standing up for democracy, etc., etc. Of course she was. The reason that she's the only one standing is because she's the only one that has a backbone. These jellyfish do not understand that all you have to do is just presume you have a backbone and you'll get one. But So a GOP participant in that meeting confirmed that there is some speculation about the actual mental faculties of this guy. And I got to remind people, everybody says, well, it's time for the 25th Amendment. Yeah, well, you got to have some cabinet members bring that up, and they're all acting at this point. If they're not confirmed by the Senate, they can't bring up the 25th Amendment. See how that works? And then, of course, we got Zuckerberg. It's because this guy wants to, let's say, rewrite history. In his manifesto, oh, yeah, you got to read this thing. I mean, this guy went to Harvard. He got into Harvard. How'd that happen? And then he dropped out of Harvard to go and make more money than God. But he went through Harvard and never took one humanities class. Is there any wonder why he is unable or incapable of understanding something as basic as the First Amendment? His company is not involved in a First Amendment issue. Only government can violate freedom of speech. He can do whatever he wants, of course, but he does have a moral responsibility to the fabric of our society. So he's rewriting history about the origins of Facebook and how, he opened up the platform for people to be free expression. And if only America would be more like Facebook. Well, excuse me, Facebook started as a misogynist frat boy strategy of rating Harvard co-eds' looks. Hence, Facebook. You put together your little black diary, and you got the phone numbers, and you got the pics. Grade A prime choice for that lady. This is Harvard, okay? I mean, we're talking a bunch of spoiled rich kids here. So, Zuckerberg wants to rewrite history. Well, we are here to set the history correct. Except, the way that Facebook works is that if anybody raises their head and is criticizing, well, let's say the right wing, they can have you blocked right now, and they do. So, you can try to set the record straight, but it feels like a public shaming and then the shunning. Sort of like that. But, look, the world is a much bigger platform than Facebook. So I would opine that in the macro aspect of this Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg apology. I don't know, what is this, apologia? It's a manifesto of sorts. And he's blaming pretty much liberal politicians for cancel culture. I got to tell you, the only people practicing cancel culture are right-wing trader bots and trolls. Take your pick. Whether they're machine or not. Whether they live here in America and work here in America or not. The only group canceling anything is from that group. Because, for instance, in these groups, even these closed groups, where the liberals somehow have been blocked and their voices muted. See, we're not only incapable of reading content now, in these closed groups, and I'm in this one that's called Uncensored. But this one trader bot who purports to have been working at Santa Onofre, and Santa Onofre is closed. Well, the word is from some of the folks in that group who have not been blocked because they don't post as much. They just, they're monitoring, say, is that this one particular trader bot who purports to be working at Santa Onofre has now invited into the closed group dozens of folks that have handles in Saudi Arabia. Fancy that. And now they have taken over that group also and are purging any criticism whatsoever. And that was brought up to Zuckerberg, and they said, so what? Well, what's on the rest of the menu here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, that was Tammy Duckworth at the top, laying down the law Trump has really set America onto a path of abandoning our allies. Well, we did it a little bit here and a little bit there by disrespecting Germany and disrespecting France and disrespecting Britain, etc., 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 because we have to take down NATO. Yes, we do. It's important. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? Moscow Mitch led the Senate vote against overriding Trump's veto for his border wall emergency declaration. So Trump believes he can just take money appropriated by Congress and put it wherever he wants. That's why Moscow Mitch is named Moscow Mitch. Martin Luther King's daughter testified the disinformation that Facebook allows now helped assassinate her father. And the U.S. Border Patrol is considering facial recognition software for border agent body cams. What could go wrong? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Vladimir Putin pulled Russia out of the 1949 Geneva Conventions Protocol 1 on civilian war crimes investigations. Well, if you're a mobster, who cares about the Geneva Conventions? Well, I guess if you're a mobster whose country is predicated upon mobsterism, the law might catch up with you, so get rid of the law. And Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York will be the acting chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee after the death of Chairman Elijah Cummings. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the rightish of the page, deftly located by Superior Graphic Design. Thank you, Tom, for that. Superior Graphic Design is our chat room link right there by the social media scroll. That's why it's deftly located. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Though the bulk of what we do comes out of our own wallets here, the bulk of our of the money does really come from us. We would be unable to do it without you. And for 8 years, your generosity has allowed us to resist, as the founders originally intended, way before the 4th of July, way back. So thank you for your generosity. Hopefully we can limp these workhorses that have been working pretty darn hard all these many years for a little bit longer, so that we can accumulate some more funds, because newish machinery is in the offing and the attendant software as well. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. And again, thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter, so follow me there. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and get that linked up on social media for your social media linking pleasure. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the rest of us. Okay, let's get in on these offerings here on a Friday. It's a Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, of course. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Donald Trump's emergency declaration, which he says allows him to redirect federal funds to build a U.S.-Mexico border wall, will stay in effect after the U.S. Senate yesterday, Thursday, failed to override his veto of legislation terminating the executive action. I think they were afraid. They see how he went off on Syria. If they don't give him at least, the idea that he's going to get the border wall, something bad, something worse could happen. Remember when I talked about the only person with a backbone in that point down? Jellyfish. The Senate voted 53-36 on whether to override the veto that Trump issued on Tuesday of legislation approved by the Senate and the House of Representatives to kill his controversial border emergency. That was well below the two-thirds majority needed in the 100-member chamber to overturn a presidential veto. This marked the second time since February when Trump issued the emergency declaration that Congress failed to override his veto. This is why they're anonymous. Sometimes they just can't be held to account. Whoever wrote this, I got to tell you, it's not Congress. It's Moscow Mitch. Moscow Mitch didn't corral the votes that were needed. He let it just happen. Or maybe he worked behind the scenes to make sure that only 10 Senate Republicans joined the 43 Senate Democrats. Trump made the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border a central promise of his 2016 presidential campaign to stop the flow of people without immigration documents from coming into the United States. No, he didn't. He played to his base and their racial animus. And the idea of a wall really just goes right against everything that is America. At the time, he insisted that Mexico would pay for the wall, an idea the Mexico government never embraced. What is astounding to me right now is this report is just taking the idea of this wall as if it's not fantasy, that we have to entertain it as some sort of rational idea. Having failed to build the wall at Mexico's expense, Trump waged several failed attempts to get the U.S. Congress to provide money for what would cost taxpayers an estimated $25 billion or more for the wall. It's going to be more when it's Donald Trump. As a result, he used his executive powers to shift money from the military budget, including appropriated funds for housing, schools, and child care for soldiers and their families. Well, if he's just willing to let the troops get blown up by the Turks, right now, does he really care about the families in the military bases he wants to be blown up anyway? Democrats have maintained that the action is illegal, as Congress has the constitutional authority to decide how federal funds are spent. Yes, it's only the Democrats that maintain it. How about every constitutional scholar of any stripe that's not right now in office? I'm talking about conservative types who are not in office. Those constitutional scholars are very able and capable of saying, yeah, it's unconstitutional. Democrats. See? It's Congress that doesn't get it passed, but it's only Democrats that are bringing up the constitutional issue. Most Democrats and many Republicans in Congress argue that there are more effective, less expensive ways of controlling the southern border, where large numbers of immigrants from troubled Central American countries and elsewhere arrive each year. Well, that's a nice way of putting it, Reuters. Very nice. more anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Disinformation campaigns helped lead to the assassination of Martin Luther King, the daughter of the U.S. civil rights champion said yesterday, Thursday, after the head of Facebook said social media should not fact-check political advertisements. The comments came as Facebook is under fire for its approach to political advertisements and speech, which Chief Executive Mark Zuckerberg defended on yesterday, in a major speech that twice referenced King, known by his initials, MLK. King's daughter Bernice tweeted that she had heard the speech. I'd like to help Facebook better understand the challenges my father faced from disinformation campaigns launched by politicians. These campaigns created an atmosphere for his assassination. And of course, we all know that Martin Luther King died of an assassin's bullet fired at him while on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th of 1968. Zuckerberg argued that his company should give voice to minority views and said that court protection for free speech stemmed in part from a case involving a partially inaccurate advertisement by King supporters. The U.S. Supreme Court protected the supporters from a lawsuit. People should decide what is credible, not tech companies, Zuckerberg said. We very much appreciate Ms. King's offer to meet with us, a Facebook spokesperson said. Her perspective is invaluable and one we deeply respect. Wink, wink. We look forward to continuing this important dialogue with her in Menlo Park next week. Brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. U.S. Customs officials are seeking information on facial recognition software for body-worn cameras that agents who police the border could use, according to a government filing. On Wednesday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection posted a request for information on body cameras, cloud storage, and video management software that could help agents in remote outposts as they check for contraband and for immigrants entering the country illegally. They're not entering the country illegally. Would you stop that? The exploratory filing does not oblige the U.S. to move forward with the program, at least as far as we know. The request listed features that CBP deemed critical, such as encryption and high-def video, and it added facial recognition as a non-required item of potential interest. Specifically, the CBP sought information on whether the ability to check faces against a database was currently available or when it would be operational, or even why a vendor chose to forgo the technology entirely. Maybe because they don't have enough people of color's faces in there and they don't recognize colored people for some reason. I wonder what the color of the coders were. The mind reels trying to figure that one out. The CBP's request underscores growing interest in facial recognition by law enforcement in the U.S. because if you give Big Brother a cookie, they're going to want an Oceania of milk. This month, California's governor signed a bill into law that bans state and local law enforcement from using body cameras with facial recognition software for 3 years, one of several recent curbs on technology that some say poses a threat to civil liberties. You know, the some who say it are like civil libertarians. Body cameras were promised to communities as a tool for officer accountability and should not be twisted into surveillance systems to be used against communities. Chris Rickard, Senior Policy Counsel for the ACLU, said in response to the CBP filing, responses to CBP's request for information are due on Halloween, October 31st. Now that is scary. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, whom is this joke on? This Take Two has spoilers because I want to talk about the racial/ethnic aspect of Joker. So, when our protagonist Arthur is about to transform into Joker, the speech he gives on the Murray Franklin Show is about how the world is a horrible joke, that people are rude and mean, and they kick you when you're down. Art's response to this world is to embrace his resentment and his emotional disabilities and strike back fatally. Put a pin in that. Joker starts by showing us Arthur's world. After being jumped by a group of Latinos, he's surrounded by African Americans. Gotham turns out to be the blackest city on the eastern seaboard, as setup after setup has African Americans in the background. In the foreground are his social worker, the rude woman on the bus, his fantasy girlfriend, the clerk at Arkham, and his doctor at Arkham. All of these characters judge Arthur and deny him successful integration into society. The other significant group in Arthur's world is Jews. His boss at the clown agency, not explicit but coded. The comedian in the club, De Niro's Murray Franklin, and Franklin's manager, again, coded. Most of these people are in positions to frustrate Arthur's successful creative and professional development. Gotham does have a white non-Jewish world. It's Arthur and his mom, and a world of money and power and positions that Arthur wants to belong to, but is ultimately cruelly rejected from. What are we to take from what seems to be a carefully constructed racial/ethnic palette? Is Joker meant to celebrate the struggle of the lower-class white male against people of color, Jews, family emasculation, and rich whites? Do we cheer, as the final crowd does, masked and thus race-free, his move to murder? Well, the problem is Arthur has mental disorders. He can't control his reaction to his environment, and thus we can neither cheer nor blame him, right? All I know is after 2 hours of what seemed like race baiting, when my audience clapped, that was no joke. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Certain concert venues, like Boston's Symphony Hall, are known to beautifully reflect the sounds of an orchestra. And it turns out there's a similar process at play in your cochlea, deep inside your ear, where a tiny bony cavity houses the organ that allows you to hear.
It's like its own tiny little acoustics chamber, if you will. So anything and everything you hear is going into your ear and then going into this little bony chamber.
Mike Gordon, a psychologist at William Patterson University in New Jersey. But while studying this process, he also found there's actually a lot of variability in the way people hear. Some frequencies can appear tens of decibels louder or quieter than average based on the resonant properties of a person's skull.
We were shocked. My first version of the draft had exclamation points all over the place, but we eventually removed those from the final copy.
First, Gordon's team gave 30 volunteers a hearing test, the standard type where different frequencies of tones are played at varying loudness. Then they did a bone conduction hearing test, where vibrations are transmitted directly onto the skull from behind the ear. Finally, they projected white noise like this through the skull from behind the ear, and they recorded what came out at the forehead. This is that white noise filtered through Gordon's skull. With those filtered samples, they were able to see the unique spectral fingerprints each volunteer's skull left on the white noise. It would amplify some frequencies and damp down others, and those ups and downs actually correlated to each volunteer's ability to perceive certain frequencies in the bone conduction hearing test, which means
the skull itself, because it's such an intimate and personal thing, is going to shape your experience of the world perceptually.
The findings appear in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America. Although the research is just preliminary, Gordon says there might be some intriguing therapeutic uses of this new insight.
What if we could cheaply and easily run broadband noise through someone's skull and look at how it filtered, and then do it again later? Would it show us an injury? Well, it might if the skull changed dramatically, which could indicate a head injury.
And more trivially, he says, perhaps it could explain why you really can't stand that one singer everybody else loves. Just blame it on the resonant properties of your skull. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
In 2012 in the United States, about 317,000 motor vehicle crashes involved a large truck. 26,000 truck drivers and their passengers were injured in these crashes, and about 700 died. Trucker safety requires an alert, buckled-up, experienced driver with a reliable vehicle and a strong employer safety program. Seat belts are the most effective way to prevent an injury or death in a motor vehicle crash, but in 2013, 1 in 6 drivers of large trucks didn't use their seat belts. Employers can help truck drivers stay safe by committing to driver safety programs at the highest level of leadership, establishing and enforcing driver safety policies, including requiring everyone in the truck to buckle up, and addressing factors that contribute to crashes, such as drowsy and distracted driving. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
October 11th, 2019, United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In the case of the city and state of New York, Connecticut, and Vermont versus the Department of Homeland Security, the issue was the new proposed DHS rule on public charge, a rule that said that when a lawful and documented immigrant receives, say, 6 months of SNAP and Medicaid benefits, which together count as 12 months, within 3 years, that person can be deported. The new proposed DHS rule was, as the judge found, a drastic deviation from the unambiguous and well-established meaning of the term public charge that has existed in immigration law for over 130 years. It means a person who is likely to become primarily and permanently dependent on the government. The judge ruled, quote, "The rule is simply a new agency policy of exclusion in search of a justification. It is repugnant to the American dream of the opportunity for prosperity and success through hard work and upward mobility. Immigrants have always come to this country seeking a better life for themselves and their posterity. With or without help, most succeed." The judge ruled the DHS had no legal authority to rewrite long-standing law. And, quote, "Plaintiff's motion for issuance of a preliminary injunction is granted." The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, and we're going all the way back to 1648. More than 100 years before the American Revolution, an early trade organization was founded in the colony of Massachusetts. They called themselves the Company of Shoemakers. Shoemakers were considered skilled craftsmen, yet changes in how shoes were made threatened their craft. The shoemakers were particularly concerned about low-skilled workers driving down wages. They formed their guild in an effort to protect their trade. This has been the basis for much of the trade union movement. The guild members argued that they were stopping, quote, "the damage which the country sustains by occasion of bad wear." They wanted to set a quality standard for their industry. To ensure that standard, they set up an apprentice system by which new workers could learn their craft under the instruction of an established shoemaker. Nearly 4 centuries later, we hear similar declarations from union electricians, carpenters, and plumbers, recognizing and promoting the professionalism and the skill of their craft is an important function for trade unions. Yet there were some differences between that early shoemakers guild and today's labor movement. One of the most notable was the names for official duties in the guild. Instead of president or secretary-treasurer, the shoemakers of Boston included titles such as a searcher, a warden, and a beadle. Another difference is that the Massachusetts colony outlawed the guild from, quote, "fixing prices." So the guild could promote the quality of their work, but could not organize for specific wages. The skilled shoemakers were some of the earliest workers to organize together. Today's labor movement continues to walk in their shoes.
These boots are made for walking.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
In an actual press conference on Thursday, the first one held in the White House briefing room in more than 7 months, Donald Trump's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, acknowledged for the first time that the White House withheld $400 million in Ukrainian aid so the country could investigate Democrats. He also added that, quote, it happens all the time. Yes, he admitted there was quid pro quo, and he did it out loud.
To be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happen as well.
We do that all the time. By the way, and this speaks to an important point, because I heard this yesterday, if you read the news reports and you believe them, what did McKinney say yesterday? That he was really upset with the political influence in foreign policy. That was one of the reasons he was so upset about this. And I have news for everybody. Get over it.
Get over it! Later in the day, as you knew he would, Mulvaney attempted to walk back those comments, claiming that the media misconstrued what he said, which is really difficult to prove, especially when the video shows what he clearly said. The statement he released, probably after a good dressing down from the president, read, quote, there was absolutely no quid pro quo between Ukrainian military aid and any investigation into the 2016 election. The president never told me to withhold any money until the Ukrainians did anything related to the server. The only reasons we were holding the money was because of concern about lack of support from other nations and concerns over corruption. Right. Now, the press briefing was actually called to announce that Trump would host the 2020 G7 summit at his Doral Golf Resort in Miami, a clear violation of the emoluments clause in the Constitution. This, as Trump is already facing multiple lawsuits and congressional investigations into similar violations where he's profiting off the presidency. As this Mulvaney thing was happening here, Vice President Mike Pence was holding a press briefing at the U.S. Embassy in Turkey after he and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Turkish President Erdogan. Pence announced victory in negotiating what they call a 5-day ceasefire. But it was actually a deal that gives Turkey exactly what it wants: control over the land that the Kurds have called home for more than 5 years. Donald Trump then took a victory lap and seemed to endorse the idea of genocide. Yes, Turkey wiping out the Kurds.
On behalf of the United States, I want to thank Turkey. I want to thank all of the people that have gotten together and made this happen. This is an incredible outcome. So you have a 22-mile strip that for many, many years, Turkey, in all fairness, they've had a legitimate problem with it. They had terrorists. They had a lot of people in there that they couldn't have. They've suffered a lot of loss of lives also, and they had to have it cleaned out. But this is an incredible outcome.
Have it cleaned out, huh? Thankfully, the media saw through and called out the lies. This is CNN's Brooke Baldwin immediately following those remarks from Trump.
All right. Where to begin? First, just starting with the Kurds, the president saying that the Kurds are very happy, that civilization is very happy. He just said, 24 hours ago, that there are no angels. And by our latest reporting, 150 to 160,000 of them have been displaced because of this decision he made after this phone conversation with President Erdogan of Turkey, number one. Number two, for him to come out and say, and I quote, this is an amazing outcome. This is total spin. This is not a victory.
Senator Mitt Romney even took to the Senate floor to counter the administration's lies.
Assuming for the sake of understanding that getting out of endless wars was the logic for the decision, why would we take action so precipitously? Why would we not warn our ally, the Kurds, of what we were about to do? Why would we not give them time to also withdraw, or perhaps to dig in to defend themselves? Clearly the Turks had a heads up because they were able to start bombing within mere hours. I simply don't understand why the administration did not explain in advance to Erdogan that it's unacceptable for Turkey to attack an American ally. Are we so weak and so inept diplomatically that Turkey forced the hand of the United States of America? Turkey? I believe that it's imperative that public hearings are held to answer these questions. And I hope the Senate is able to conduct those hearings next week.
But at his rally in Dallas Thursday night, Trump went even further with this disgusting imagery.
We've all agreed on a pause or a ceasefire in the border region of Syria. And it was unconventional what I did. I said, They're going to have to fight a little while. Sometimes you have to let them fight a little while. Then people find out how tough the fighting is. Sometimes you have to let them fight. It's like two kids in a lot. You got to let them fight, and then you pull them apart.
And as for that ceasefire, it's already over, if indeed it ever was in effect. Here's Griff Jenkins of Fox.
Now, I've been on the phone with my source all night long, as recent as 10 minutes ago. He's 10 kilometers from that town, Ras Al Ain, you're looking at. He says, quote, the ceasefire is broken. He questions whether it was ever even enforced or attempted to do so. He is with an NGO. They've been trying to get trapped Kurds out of Ras Al Ain all night long, and they cannot. He makes a distinct point. He has not seen airstrikes in the last several hours, but Kurdish Syrian fighters have told the AP that they have seen shelling going on overnight. Now, that is very, very troubling. Kurds cannot retreat, my source says. Roads are blocked. This 5-day ceasefire was supposed to give Kurds time to retreat. They cannot.
And even if they could retreat, they have nowhere to go. That's the point, and it's sickening. Moving on, in impeachment inquiry news, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, sat for a closed-door deposition on Thursday for more than 9 hours. His opening statement was released to the public, and some who were in the room confirmed that Sondland corroborated much of the whistleblower's report. The investigation continues. The United Kingdom and the European Union have reportedly struck a deal on Brexit, but it faces long odds of getting through Britain's parliament, where lawmakers are expected to vote on it this weekend. Remember, former Prime Minister Theresa May failed 3 times to get similar deals approved, and the agreement current Prime Minister Boris Johnson helped broker faces an uphill battle. And back at home, almost 50,000 GM workers will stay out on strike for at least another week. The United Auto Workers Union has recommended that a tentative deal with GM be ratified, so workers will vote on the agreement soon. The deal would give workers higher pay, protect their health insurance coverage, and provide an easier path for temporary workers to obtain permanent status. However, the deal won't save an assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio, or 2 U.S. transmission plants. And Chicago teachers are on strike. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. Please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 55 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly the same temperature as yesterday, which will be around 60 degrees overnight, lows in the low 50s. We had rain overnight and look like we'll have cloudy skies early, then partly cloudy skies this afternoon, though it looks like it's drizzling as I speak at this very moment. Rain will pick up tonight. Looks like we're going to get about 1/4 of an inch of rain, about 1/10 of an inch until then. Winds are out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour and will remain so. And we will have showers tomorrow. Looks like about another 1/4 of an inch, and winds will be out of the west-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then looks like maybe rain on Sunday, though it will be intermittent. Right now, ragweed pollen is moderate. Air quality index is 32 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.06 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 62 and partly cloudy. Rome is 74 and fair. Kiev is 64 and fair. Kabul is 54 and fair. Hong Kong is 74 and fair. Tokyo is 60 degrees with rain and a flood watch because there's typhoons in the area. Sydney, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 54 and sunny. And New York, New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Stefan Kravchenko of Bloomberg brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Vladimir Putin is pulling Russia out of a key element of the Geneva Conventions that authorizes investigations into war crimes against civilians. Putin issued the decree on Wednesday to withdraw from Protocol 1 of the 1949 Convention relating to the protection of victims of international armed conflicts, citing exceptional circumstances affecting the interests of the Russian Federation and requiring urgent action. The protocol authorizes the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission to investigate alleged war crimes and other grave breaches against civilians caught up in armed conflicts. The commission, established in 1991, comprises 15 independent experts elected by the 77 states, including Russia, that have recognized the body. It carried out a 2017 probe into the death of a paramedic working for the Organization for Security and Cooperation's monitoring mission in eastern Ukraine. During the conflict between government forces and Russian-backed separatists, it also discussed the wars in Syria and Yemen at its annual meeting in Geneva in April. And now, Vladimir Putin is backing out of the Geneva Conventions. I wonder what that means.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. U.S. Representative Carolyn Maloney will be the acting chair of the House Oversight and Reform Committee after the death of Chairman Elijah Cummings, a senior Democratic leadership aide said. Maloney is the number 2 Democrat on the panel. The caucus process to elect a permanent chair will be announced at a later time, the aide said. Well, rest in peace, Elijah Cummings. You are a giant among giants. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, in fact, all day and over the weekend. We're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up on Monday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.